Hey, good morning, everyone. So happy to be with you on this Monday. I'm Yunji Denise here with Ryan Kalei-Suji for the COVID-19 Care Conversation. This is a place where we can share resources, talk to leaders who are making important decisions when it comes to fighting the coronavirus pandemic here in the islands. And it's brought to you by the Hawaii Executive Collaborative and Hawaii Pacific Health. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning, Yanji. Yes, we are entering, I believe, week 6 of this stay-at-home, and so glad to see so many people already signing in, saying good morning. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing your comments. Today we have with us yet again Governor David Ige, who will be joining us. So we encourage you, if you have questions for the governor, go ahead and enter your questions into the comment section. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. We know there's a lot of people out there with questions about when the state will reopen, what types of businesses will begin reopening. We'll be asking the governor those questions again. We normally always like to begin this broadcast by giving an update on the counts. And again, we continue to see those low numbers, which is nice to see for not only state officials, but everybody, the general public. Good to see that all the hard work of staying home, keeping that curve flat continues to happen. Unfortunately, there was another death reported over the weekend. A 60-year-old Maui woman died. COVID-19 is not believed to be the primary cause of death, but a contributing factor. But yesterday there were 2 new cases, bringing that total up to 620.
Yeah, and the day before that, actually the 2 days before that, Friday and Saturday, we saw just single digits, just one, not even single digits, just one case each day, which was great to see. We had Nick Redding from the Hawaii Data Collaborative on Friday as our guest, and he was telling us that the curve has not flattened, but is actually trending down. And when you look at the good news in those numbers, 88% of the people who have tested positive for this virus here in the islands have now been classified as released from isolation and recovered. So we are so happy to see that. Of course, we are still have plenty of concerns about that remaining 12%, but 88% recovery and 1 or 2 cases a day is really wonderful to see.
Yeah, definitely on the right track. But the question now remains, how do we begin to reopen the state? What businesses will then begin to get the green light to practice social distancing while being able to service their customers and try to get our economy back up in shape, because we know that we're seeing obviously a devastating blow to the impacts of this pandemic. And joining us now is Governor David Ige to talk a little bit more about the state's effort, what sort of an update on things that are happening. Governor, good morning. Good to see you again on this Monday. First off, if we can sort of start off by maybe talking about the reopening process. We know that there were some businesses that were allowed to reopen last week, and we could expect to see another phase this week. What sorts of businesses specifically might we be able to see reopening in this next phase?
So just a couple of things, Ryan. Thank you, Yunji and Ryan, for having me on. It really is a terrific opportunity to be able to talk with your viewers and really respond to their questions. As you said and you started, I really wanted to thank everyone, because it does require working together as a team to really flatten the curve and reduce the numbers. And as you've said, we've now had 2 weeks or 14 days of 6 or lower positive cases for the last 2 weeks. So, that was one of the trends and conditions we talked about. What are the conditions that is necessary so that we can keep our community safe? So the first was a declining trend in cases. And as I've said, we've seen that. Capacity in the healthcare system. We want to make sure that, I think, Yunji, as you talked about, the fact that 88% have recovered, the fact that even though every death is tragic, the number of deaths in the state has been very low. It is a testament to the healthcare system and the fact that, I think people pay attention. If they begin to get symptoms, they're going to see their doctor earlier in the disease episode, and that really helps us to be successful. So just really wanted to reaffirm that our decisions will be driven by data in how we believe the conditions are, and we won't be proceeding forward until we see the right conditions. So yes, and I want people to know that we are seeing the right conditions. So fewer cases, we can handle capacity in our healthcare system. The third is really a robust testing program. And, we are now capable of testing more than 3,000 people per day all across the state. And we still have more than 40 testing centers that are open. So we do see the three key conditions available to talk about reopening our economy. So I think that that's good news for many who've been at home. I like to personally refer to this next phase as safer at home, but obviously allowing for more activities out and about. We are looking at the first phase of businesses besides the essential ones that we believe can be reopened. As you've heard, the mayors have already looked at county parks and have reopened county parks. We are looking at state parks and we'll be making an announcement on those. Again, it's outdoors. The risk of virus infection is low as long as it's not large gatherings. People going to the parks to exercise individually, is a relatively low risk activity. And I'm a runner, and so I haven't been able to get to my running spot, which is Ala Moana Park, because it's been closed. But certainly, I think that that's important for people to be able to do and get out and exercise, and it's a relatively low risk. We also are looking at agriculture, the non-food production, flowers, floral culture, anthuriums, right, Ryan, from the Big Island. Those kinds of businesses that are so important. Reopening all of the other agriculture other than food production is certainly something that we see as low risk. And I've talked about the florists already. Definitely wanting to make sure that they can do it in a safe way, but we believe it's relatively simple to do that. We did reopen elective hospital procedures, and so certainly people with not so critical healthcare needs certainly should reconnect with their healthcare providers. We're allowing all of the hospitals to assess what their utilization is and begin to make decisions to allow elective procedures to occur. So you'll see those kinds of things. And then we look generally at retail. There's a lot of different ways that retail can set up their businesses to reduce the risk to employees and the risk to the customers. So it is about managing the number that gets into a retail. We certainly are encouraging online sales and curbside contactless pickups. I mean, obviously, all of those kinds of things allows businesses to transact business without putting customers or employees at risk.
Yeah, it's hard to think about, when we think about specific kinds of retail, you think about shopping. A lot of times people like to go in and touch things, try clothes on, pick up a book or an object, whatever the case may be, and actually, touch and feel the item before they purchase it. How do you envision that going forward? I know you could limit the number of people allowed into a store, but would they be allowed to try clothes on? Would they be allowed to touch the merchandise? How does that work?
All of the information that we have is that the virus can live quite long on shiny surfaces, so glass, metal, those kinds of surfaces, definitely countertops. The virus tends to survive longer. We do know that more absorbent kinds of materials, clothing, cardboard, those kinds of things the virus tends to live for a much, much shorter period of time. So I think the challenge is that every business needs to rethink how they operate in the COVID-19 environment. So, the whole notion of when someone tries on clothes at the store, for example, the need to sanitize and get those kinds of things as part of the daily operations of retail businesses, all of those things have to be incorporated. So, I think that that's the challenge.
One of the comments I should say came in is about the restaurants. Let restaurants reopen. They can practice social distancing. I'm sure they'll be creative and comply with mandates. We're seeing restaurants open in some parts of the country with that social distancing. Is that something that could happen sooner rather than later? We know that initially restaurants were said that it might be towards the end of these phases. But what are your thoughts on these restaurants, and could they have these social distancing measures in place and maybe reopen sooner than later?
So, Ryan, we definitely are working with a Hawaii Restaurant Association and really gathering best practices from around the country and around the world. So we do anticipate a phased reopening even in restaurants. And so obviously we've said restaurants can continue to operate on a takeout basis or delivery. The next phase would probably be limited reopening of dine-in facilities. We definitely would have to reduce the numbers that we would allow, to 50% or 25%. We continue to work with the industry to really figure out how can we phase in restaurants reopening in a way that allows us to keep the employees safe as well as the customers. So we do anticipate that would happen, but it would be in a phased way.
I'm seeing a lot of questions about travel. Mark here, Nakahoro, asking, when do you plan to lift the 14-day quarantine? We had asked you about this the last time you were here, also in terms of doing inter-island travel and out-of-state travel. And I know you said that those were sort of two separate tracks.
Right.
What is the time frame? What are you looking at with both of those tracks?
We certainly are looking at the inter-island quarantine first and thinking about what would make the most sense. And we've actually talked about whether you could do it, allow maybe 2 islands to begin it or other ways to try and phase in again inter-island travel. So we do talk with the airlines to talk about what is realistic in terms of from their perspective, as well as remember a lot of the hotels are really shut down. So coordinating some kind of reopening or allowing for inter-island travel really needs to be coordinated with the hotels as well, or the number of traveling would be limited. But so we do anticipate that the inter-island quarantine would end first, and then we would look at broader travelers coming from across the country as well as around the world. But certainly we'll be looking at that issue in the month of May and trying to make decisions about what makes sense. Certainly domestic travel and international would be further out than May.
Let's talk a little bit about that, about the efforts that the state is doing to really make sure to protect, or I should say, to screen those visitors that are coming in from out of the state. We know that the Senate COVID task force has gone to the airport. They've shared their concerns about some of the loopholes that are happening, people that are still getting through despite some of these new processes. But we also know that the state is working on some extreme measures to implement. What is sort of the vision and maybe the timeline of when we will begin seeing some of those harsher or stricter, I should say, screening measures for those visitors coming in?
Certainly, Ryan, we're doing a couple things. The Safe Travels website that we put up is just a website, not an app. So we are in the process of developing it as an app for both the iPhone and Google platform, Android platform, because we do get more information from the app. We can get location and other information. So that's kind of the next progression that allows us to be aware of where those under quarantine are and check in on them in a more efficient way, and then be able to find them if we need to. So we do believe that is kind of the next step that's important. And we have been looking at what Korea, Japan, some of the other countries are doing, just in terms of how do you reopen travel? As long as we have a mandatory quarantine, the numbers who are coming here are going to be very, very, very low. So what is the next phase after quarantine? There really needs to be a couple things. We're working with the hotels to ask them to be partners in educating the travelers about what a responsible traveler would be willing to do. Make sure that they're well if they begin to get sick, they need to treatment and they need to isolate so that they don't infect others. So, we do envision the entire hospitality industry being part of that partnership. How do you educate travelers? How do you identify when they're getting sick? How do we get them to services that they need? How do we isolate them so that they don't infect other travelers and they don't infect residents? So all of those need to work hand in hand so that when we talk about ending the quarantine, our community feels safe, and that if there is an individual who comes here and becomes ill, that we can test them and isolate them rapidly so that the broader community is not infected.
I'm seeing a lot of people asking us to talk about unemployment, and we do want to let people know that tomorrow we will have Scott Murakami here from the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations. But ahead of him appearing, can you let us know if you have any updates in terms of the responsiveness of the unemployment system? I mean, obviously, they've had to respond to tens of thousands of claims. Are you satisfied with the rate that people are getting paid? And do you anticipate the backlog to be addressed anytime soon?
It is not satisfactory. I mean, I know that there are many who have been unemployed now for several weeks, and we haven't been able to get them the unemployment benefits that they qualify for. I would like to say, though, that we've distributed in the month of April and through May 1st more than $229 million in benefits to those who are unemployed. So I think to some extent, at least the benefits are getting out. There is still too many people who are entered, their application is in our system, but there's an error somewhere that prevents them from getting the benefits. And I know that you guys have been on this for a long time. It is the number one priority in this pandemic, is really trying to get those who are unemployed the benefits that they need so that they can pay the rents and buy food and all the necessities in life. It does remain our number one priority, and Scott can give you a better update. So we are making progress. I think the challenge is that those who haven't received benefits, it's because the errors that we see in the system are more complicated. All of the straightforward ones, misspellings, entering wrong social security numbers, or the wrong employer, that's all been resolved, and those people are getting benefits. The cases that are in the system are really multi-errors and more complicated. So, we continue to put the resources on it to try and reduce the backlog.
I think one obvious example of the fact that people are just struggling was some of the food drives that have been happening. I mean, we saw last week over 4,000 people showing up for that food drive in YPO. There's happened to be more over the weekend. What is your sort of response when you see that? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people hurting if we're getting that amount of people signing up or showing up to get this free food. I mean, I don't think we've ever seen that in the state. Is there anything that the state can do on that end, maybe to help provide more support for food, or is there anything else? Because I know a lot of people are waiting for checks and for money, but there's obviously a telling sign when we see those long lines for food.
Certainly we're working with the counties and all of the nonprofits that really provide this vital service to our community. I know both of you have been very supportive of the food bank, and that's one of the big distributors. But the Federal CARES Act funds can be used to support the community with food distribution, Ryan. So I think all of the counties are trying to establish a more regular distribution of the food, so that we don't have 4,000 people showing up on one day. If we can do 2 or 3 or 4 food distributions on Oahu every week, then at least we can disperse the numbers that show up at any given distribution point. So, we continue to work with the counties to establish more locations to distribute food, and then try and establish a more regular schedule of when the food can be distributed. Because we do know that too many people in our community are food insecure and are really struggling.
I know that you have limited time, but I want to ask you before you go, given the challenges that you outlined with tourism and even, simple retail and some of the things that we're used to seeing, are you envisioning a major sort of state infusion of money to restart the economy, something like a major public works project initiative? Where do you see the state trying to help get that started absent the tourist economy anytime soon?
Thank you so much, Yenji, for that question. Yes, we are looking at, the state's bond rating has been the highest it's ever been, and so we actually in this session was preparing for a big stimulus of CIP projects. So, we have been collecting all the agencies, identifying shovel-ready projects that, if funded, would be able to get into our economy quickly. We are preparing for that. At the same time, I am on a call with the governors, and today, for the first time, we've actually started talking about a federal stimulus focused on infrastructure. For us governors, transportation infrastructure, critical infrastructure is the easiest kind of project that has a pretty quick impact in our economy because it gets people hired. So there definitely is more talk at the federal level about a federal stimulus. So, we definitely are going to do it at the state level to the extent that we have funds. The interest rates continue to be low. Our bond rating is good. We certainly are encouraging the federal to add their dollars. And, that is the one area that we think can make a big impact besides tourism.
One of the questions also that we saw come in was about the group sizes that will be allowed for people to gather in. Right now, we know that it's sort of restricted to those in your household, but leading into the mandated stay-at-home order, there was, the group size of no more than 10 people gathered with social distancing, and it was sort of a numbered approach to the size of groups. Could we see that change? Could we see that sort of implemented back again, where the groups of 10 might be allowed again to sort of allow some sort of interaction with social distancing? Because I think a lot of people, we saw it last week. You talked about running at Ala Moana Beach Park. Governor, I don't know if you can make it. There's so many people at Ala Moana running. You might not even have chance to run. But I'm saying is there this group sizes? Is there a way to kind of increase that so people aren't maybe confined to just their home?
I think that's the other dimension that we are looking at, Brian. Besides the general stay-at-home order, as I say and talk about safer at home. So not only the essential business, but other business activities to go and purchase and buy things, but really return home is still the recommendation. We are looking at the gathering size, and right now it's at virtually zero, right, except for your household. We are looking at that and whether it would make sense for us to expand that to 10. That might be one of the parameters that we might open up in the month of May. We will continue to look at the number of cases, and if we do see a spike in that threatens the healthcare system, then we would have to go back and reduce that number again. But that is one of the parameters that we think would allow at least a return to more normal, even though everything is going to be different moving forward.
I know it's very hard to project out that far, but what are your thoughts about school in the fall? Do you think that we will be able to have school as we know it in the fall? We had Corey Rosenlee on here last week, and he was talking about just some of the challenges that, Hawaii schools face in a normal year, looking at class sizes of up to 40 students, which is, virtually impossible to socially distance, especially in some of the classrooms that are, relegated to trailers just because some of those schools are so overcrowded. So he was talking about possible every other day school or doing some kind of a block system, some students in the morning, some students in the afternoon. What do you see happening for schools?
That certainly is a very hot topic now, Yunji. I think all across the country, people are thinking about what changes need to happen. We all know how important schools are to our community. From a childcare perspective, from the learning perspective, we definitely know that we need to reduce the numbers. So Teleschool, I think, will be part of the next fall, at least some population not going to campus every day so that we can reduce the numbers. Corey talked about phasing and kind of a morning group and an afternoon. I think that that is part of the future. One of the other conversations we've had at the governor's level and with a lot of the experts across the country is, young people, especially school age, K through college, typically are not very impacted by the virus. So, part of the conversation is about whether that is a reasonable risk to take. Reopening schools, recognizing we would need to be able to test students and be able to identify them if they got ill. But the value of having schools and being able to support parents in going to work, and the risk of what the impact is when young people get COVID-19, that's kind of the public social balancing that we're talking about all across the country. Everybody is struggling with what is the best policy to deal with schools and childcare centers for that matter.
All right, Governor, we know that our time is ending up here, but just wanted to give you an opportunity to say something. We also know that you're having a press conference that's happening later today. Is there any sort of things that we can be prepared to hear, or any announcement that's coming up there that we should be aware of, maybe that will be announced?
Yes, certainly a couple of things. David Lassner at the university is going to at least be talking about university plans. There's been a lot of discussion, and I think that they haven't decided, but he really wanted to keep students, especially, kind of updated about what they're thinking. We are beginning to look at state parks and reopening state parks. So, we might have the list of state parks that will be reopened. Some of them are just too busy to reopen. If you think about Diamond Head and up to the Diamond Head Lookout is just too many people. But there are many parks that are broad enough and expansive enough that will be reopening. So that's kind of that phase. And, we are very close to rolling out what the reopening plan is in general. We've been meeting with the business community, talking about that, the health community, so that we can set the benchmarks that would trigger either reopening more businesses or re-implementing restrictions, just because we want to make sure that we don't get into New York or New Jersey where the healthcare system is overrun by COVID-19 patients. So I just really wanted to thank you for giving me this opportunity. I really wanted to thank the community, because our success is really due to everybody taking their responsibility and doing their part to social distance, if they're ill, to isolate themselves and not infect others. And most importantly, allowed us to keep our kupuna safe and not see the kind of overwhelming bad outcomes that we've seen in other states. So just wanted to thank everyone.
All right, Governor David Ige, thank you very much. Yet another week we're starting together in this sort of COVID-19 era, but thank you very much for taking the time. We know you're busy, and we look forward to seeing you again. Aloha.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ryan, well, a couple of things, and I know a lot of you have a lot of questions, and especially on those unemployment questions. Remember, Scott Murakami is going to be here, so we are going to get into the weeds with all of that with him tomorrow on the unemployment issue. The governor spoke broadly about the challenges there, but I know that a lot of you have specific questions about the unemployment system, specifically the website and the call center, and we're going to pose those to Scott Murakami tomorrow. But going back to what the governor was saying, there was a couple of things that stuck out to me, and Ryan, I'd love your thoughts. The fact that inter-island travel could open, and they might do it island by island, which is a really interesting thought, because I know that some county mayors are probably a little more reluctant than others. So there could be some that would be more open to opening travel to their islands first. Also interesting to just hear him talk about the changes that they're looking at when it comes to school. Him saying that distance learning is likely to be part of the fall semester, and that they are considering, perhaps doing what Corey Rosenlee had talked about every other day, or just in the mornings and the afternoons, and staggering students. So I think there was a lot in that interview that we heard from him this morning.
Yeah, and I think that they are still reluctant, obviously, to give us any specific, keys in terms of what businesses are opening up. It sounds like they are still trying to figure out what that looks like. We sort of asked him to provide us maybe what businesses are going to be open next week or the weeks after, and basically they're still trying to figure that out. I mean, they're talking. He said essentially with all of these different types of organizations and businesses to figure out the best practices for each of these areas. So I'm not sure that they have that wrapped up. He said that they're still trying to figure out the phasing approach to that. We also talked about the group sizes and saying that we could eventually see those group sizes get larger. But another interesting note he also said was about those unemployment benefits, that a lot of the things that are holding them up right now are those with the errors that are made. So they're having to go back in individually to sort of check to see what those errors were made and follow up with those people directly, which obviously takes more time. Again, we'll hear more from Scott Murakami tomorrow to maybe get more clarity on that. But obviously that is a big issue. And Governor recognizing that a lot of people are struggling. We're seeing thousands of people showing up for free food and finding ways that the CARES Act can maybe help to provide more food and at those distribution centers.
Right, and the idea that we could see a major public works project, not just one, but I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of roads and different infrastructure that need help, and getting the federal government to maybe put up some money for that, because obviously the state tax basis has been decimated with all this unemployment. One of the questions that I saw that I just wanted to quickly answer was asking about whether you can get paid if you are, if your unemployment is backdated. Because Scott Murakami has been on here, and every time he comes on, he does say that you will be made whole, so to speak, from the time that you were separated from your employer. So I know a lot of people are really anxious. Obviously, you need money as soon as possible. They're also anxious that if they don't file right away, they might lose those benefits. Let's say you got laid off on April 1st. Our understanding is that once that error is cleared and you've proven that you are entitled to those benefits, you will get paid backdated, not just for the week that it is at the time that you actually get cleared. So that's something to at least hopefully give you a little bit of solace that you will be made whole.
Yeah, and again, we encourage all of you to go back and watch our past interviews. There's a lot of the questions that are coming in, including why can't the unemployment office be open 24/7? We asked that question last week. So if you want to go back and watch sort of those interviews, a lot of the questions specifically for unemployment were sort of answered in some of our previous discussions with Director Murakami, who again will be here tomorrow, and we'll try to ask him some of those same questions, but we kind of want to be able to provide, there's a lot of questions obviously on unemployment, and we want to try to get to as many of them as possible. So if we are not asking your specific question, it's not that we are ignoring you. There's a lot of questions coming in, and a lot of times they are often what we already covered. So we want to be able to include as many questions as we possibly can. Moving on though, we know that there are still a lot of other headlines that have sort of made news over the weekend.
Yeah, that's right. Kauai County is shifting to a 4-day work week as they face the reopening of their economy. This is very interesting, and we could see this not just in public works, but also in private industry. As people start to work online, there is a move now to maybe have more people continuing to do that even after the pandemic is over. Kauai County is going to a 10-hour workday, 4 days a week. Their thinking there is that they can at least limit exposure for people if they're staying indoors, one extra day. That's that much less opportunity for them to spread the virus. So interesting to see that the mayor there acknowledging that could be challenging for some people to work that long of a day. Maybe they have some childcare issues, that much longer, especially now that there is no school. But they're taking that on. And I think that we could see a lot more of that, again, not just at the county level, but, in private industry as well.
Just re-looking at the way businesses do businesses is sort of the new norm, I think, moving forward. Another interesting article that is in the Honolulu Star Advertiser is sort of the new safety measures that the state is sort of implementing for this COVID-19 world that we now live in with travelers coming in. One of the interesting notes in that is that the Department of Transportation is gearing up to bring airport thermal screening to Hawaii, which would become the first U.S. state to adopt that technology. We do see it in some Asian countries and airports where they do that thermal screening, but it's the Department of Transportation saying that they are going to be bringing that in. We're seeing more airlines now that are requiring masks for people that travel in. And we are also going to be continuing to see more of these rulings that, as the governor said when we asked him about those travelers coming in place, because there seems to be a lot of these visitors that are sort of sliding through the cracks here. they're looking for new ways to sort of reinforce that. There's an article that sort of details what Hawaii Tourism Authority, who is sort of now taking the lead on that, some of the efforts that they're making and the plans that they're taking to sort of close those loopholes.
Yeah, and we have a call out to some leaders in the travel industry to come on this program. We know that you'd like to hear from them. We are so lucky that we've had the governor on almost every Monday, so that's been great. Scott Murakami on Tuesdays. Looking ahead just to this week, we also have a doctor that's coming on Wednesday to talk about specific COVID-related care and symptoms. That's Dr. Melinda Ashton. And then on Thursday, we have Lieutenant Governor Josh Green. So we've got a lot of great people coming up, but we'd like to hear from you, who you'd like to hear from. And we know that someone in the tourism industry would be much appreciated. So we appreciate that suggestion and we are working on that.
That's right. And we'd like to always end the show by highlighting our Hawaii hero. And this one we would like to highlight is Malama Meals, who is working on food distribution, one of the many food distributions, again, that we're seeing throughout the state.
Yeah, wonderful to see that. They're a not-for-profit program with the city and county of Honolulu and a bunch of different restaurant partners and vendors that are providing meals to groups of people who are in need, specifically people obviously who are lower income and also the elderly. So we really mahalo them. They've done an amazing job. They are delivering meals right now to 63 locations. They've fed over 8,000 people, over 200,000 meals already. If you need help, if you might be in one of these categories, you can check them out, malamameals.org. Check out their website. You can find out if you or the group that you're in can qualify to get some of these delicious hot meals. And we really appreciate them. And so we salute them as our Hawaii hero of the day.
That's right. We want to thank, and of course, if you have a Hawaii hero that you would like to highlight or spotlight, make sure that you let us know, because we know that there are a lot of great things that are happening in the community and a lot of people coming together to make that possible. Of course, we want to encourage you. Another big thing that's happening is the census. A lot of the federal dollars that Hawaii receives and will get not only in the immediacy, but really throughout the next 10 years is based on the information that is provided in the census. And we want to make sure that everyone is counted here in Hawaii. So make sure you should have received something in the mail. If not, you can head online and complete the census. Again, it's very quick. It's easy to do. It's 2020census.gov, and a great and easy way for you to help support the local economy and make sure that we get the money that Hawaii deserves for its people.
Yeah, that is safe and secure and confidential. So please do fill out the census. The other thing that we want to talk to you about just really quick is that we know that a lot of you are stuck at home. You might be bored. You might have kids who are stuck at home and bored. A lot of museums across the country have started offering virtual tours. And one of those that is also doing that is Iolani Palace. It's probably been a long time since you've been to the palace. I know I haven't been since I was in school, so it's been quite a long time. But it is a beautiful place. It's a tremendous resource here in Hawaii, a nice way for you to, just explore what makes Hawaii so special. That, of course, IolaniPalace.org. So check them out. You can take a virtual tour of the palace. A lot of museums and different galleries offering this, but we were so happy to see that Iolani Palace has joined that as well.
Yeah, that's right. A great place. Make sure you head over there and support them as well. So again, we want to thank you guys for tuning in and for all your questions. Again, Director Scott Murakami will be here tomorrow, and we will look forward to having more discussions with him as well with all of you here again tomorrow. So on behalf of Yanji and I, we will see you back here tomorrow at 10:30. Aloha.